On. About 30 years ago, maybe a little less, I'm not sure, but it seems to be about 30 years ago, there was a very funny sitcom on television called Moving On Up. Remember that? Moving On Up? It featured a family that had worked hard, sacrificed personal pleasure, and finally, after a measure of years, achieved enough money and prestige to move to a new and economically advantageous position in society. This is noted repeatedly in the television series by the theme song. We're moving on up, remember that? Moving on up to the east side. What is it? To a deluxe apartment in the sky? Something like that. I won't sing it, but you get the idea. We're moving on up to the east side to a deluxe apartment in the sky, and then something like, we finally earned a piece of the pie. Something like that. This, of course, is a song that was meant to look back on a life of people who once were outsiders looking in. They were once relatively poor, they had little, and then they saw the people of wealth living in comfort and respectability. And now, finally, it must be stressed, this family, the Jeffersons, that was her name, no longer were outsiders. And also must be stressed that because of their disciplined labor, nothing was given these people. They were very hardworking people. Finally, after one perceives many years of hard work and discipline, they finally made it. Of course, and this is what people always do, they brought their personal baggage with them to the east side, and in particular the husband, George Bombastic and irreverent. He took all the credit for success, while the strong and quiet, well, somewhat quiet wife, Weesey, knew better. Why? Because even though the conventional wisdom of any society would affirm a person's worth by the success that they have garnered, she knew better. Moving on up. Jesus, as Mr. Rook read our text this morning, was assembling his family to move on up as well, as it turned to move on up to the east side of Jerusalem, where sat the great temple complex of Judaism. It represented those who had made it religiously speaking. It represented those who were acceptable religiously speaking. It represented power, prestige, accomplishment. It represented where none other than God could be met if you met the correct criteria to meet God, according to the religious elites and their understanding and practice of how to get to God. It also represented the full gathering or culmination of the conventional wisdom, religious wisdom of Judaism. In other words, there on the east side at the temple, up on the temple, in the high-rise area, up there, one could find the true path to God. Meanwhile, Jesus, the one who in time would be called the true path, the one who in time would be called the Way. He was walking toward Jerusalem, slowly, deliberately, and a fire was smoldering in his belly. He was moving on up to the east side to torch it. Don't think otherwise. Not to destroy Judaism, but to refine the way it was practiced with the hot coals of truth. Namely, that the way Judaism at that time was presented and practiced by the religious purveyors was an abomination to God. God. Jesus' Father was a power of compassion, not neglect. God. Jesus' Father was a power of forgiveness, not damnation. God. Jesus' Father was inclusive, not parochial. God. Jesus' Father was a power of peace, gentleness, grace, and joy, and certainly not the way practiced in Israel 2,000 years ago.